Well, we've got Neil Stevenson on the line and we're going to talk about his book, The Email from God. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Toby. Yeah, and glad to be talking with you today about my new book.
Yes. So what is the story of the book about?
The book doesn't look as if it's been written by me, and my name doesn't appear on it anywhere. It looks as if it's been compiled by 5 people who live in the year 2046. And they all work at a place called CERN in Switzerland, which is where they have the Large Hadron Collider. Do you know about that place?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I think in about 2012, they discovered a new particle called the God particle. And basically, these people have been working from then on using the Large Hadron Collider and also a new one they're going to build called the Future Circular Collider to create 2 God particles that can smash together into a inner chamber that will create a tiny wormhole which will open just for a few billionths of a second and allow a nanochip, a very tiny chip, to get sent back in time. So it doesn't actually move anywhere, it just stays in the chamber but goes back in time. And the reason why they've created this chip is to warn humans of impending disasters like earthquakes or volcanoes and things that kill people. So it's sort of like an ability to send information back in time. So they've been working on this project for many years, and it's cost billions of pounds to create. But the problem is that the people who have been funding it all this time now want to put their own information on the chip to send back in time for their own devices to improve their own lot in life.
Yeah.
So that's very basically it.
Writing a book that kind of starts in 2046, how do you know how to write that? Because it's in the future, but it's arguably not too far in the future, so you don't want to overdo all the future stuff.
No. Well, okay, so the clues in the title of the book, The Email from God, the people who are living, the 5 characters who are living in 2046, they can remember back to January of 2023, which is nearly upon us, when everybody who got an email account in the world received an email from God. And it's not the Christian God or any of the ones that humans have invented. It's like a universal conscious energy that actually created our universe. So I've kind of created a God for the purpose. So the email that gets sent to everybody basically delivers an ultimatum. And this is the reason why I wrote the book, actually, is because it contained within the actual email from God, which is it is featured in my book. It lays out exactly what humans need to be doing to become sustainable, because at the moment, as you're probably aware, we really aren't. We're destroying the planet and the environment. We're using up all of our resources, and we've got a very serious problem coming ahead. And unfortunately, our world leaders don't seem to be doing enough about it. They're meeting right now as we speak in COP27 in Egypt. And once again, it's just a festival of people arriving in private jets and agreeing targets that they never meet. And therefore, humans are not sustainable, and we're not going to get ourselves out of this hole that we're in terms of as a human race. So the email does that. It kind of says it's got these commandments in the email that people have to follow. And the day after the email, that all begins. And people get a terrible headache, like a terrible migraine, if they don't follow the commandments within God's email.
Wow.
So basically, leading up to 2046, everybody's been forced to do what God says in his email. And it's small things like war is banned. We're not spending any more money on war in the world. And suddenly, hey, we've got loads of extra money to spend on good things. So it's quite a radical solution. But the idea being is, although the book is essentially a novel, it is to get people to really think about, where we're going as a species and why our leaders aren't actually doing what they're meant to be doing, and they're not working in our interests.
Yeah. If you'd have written the book 40 years ago, do you think it would have been called a fax from God?
Yeah, I think it probably would, or even a letter, but
Yeah.
it isn't. I mean, it is an email, and the fact is that although I've had the idea for the book for about 12 years, I started writing it 2 years ago. In fact, I quit a perfectly good full-time job to do it because I
Yeah.
believe in it so much. But the fact is that it's so bang up to date because it mentions a lot of present day things that are going on, such as COVID, such as Brexit and the Queen dying and Boris and all that's mentioned in the book. To kind of allow the reader to feel, hang on a sec, this is talking about real time now, how we are living, compared to these people who've had seen an email arrive in January next year, and since then they've seen the whole world sort of gradually improve, and a lot of projects around the world to help make us more sustainable and actually to stop damaging our environment.
How long did the book actually take you to write?
Well, it took me pretty much 10 years to think it out in my brain, and that just was absolutely doing my head in because it is the way it's written. There's a lot of information in it, and it's a complicated story. But I've tried to write it in a way that is very easy to read, and it's a bit. There's a set of books that's nothing like the Email from God, but the Game of Thrones books. That guy who wrote those introduces literally hundreds of characters to the reader, and it's quite easy to do that because of the way he writes it. So a lot of the problem over the 10 years was how to actually tackle the book and how to write it. But the actual writing process began just over 2 years ago. And there was a lot of research going on. I've had to teach myself particle physics and how the Large Hadron Collider works and so forth. I've had to invent a new element to make it all work, on the periodic table. There's been a lot of research, and then I started writing in earnest probably last autumn, a year ago, and then I just went into recluse mode, and I've not seen any friends or anything since January up until June.
Wow.
Writing it every hour that I could, 16, 20 hours some days, just writing it.
How do you not end up burnt out if you're writing that much?
Well, I think that it quickly became relevant that I had to quit my job because I was trying to write it in my spare time, and there just wasn't the time to do it. So when COVID hit the job I was working in, it changed everything, and it wasn't enjoyable anymore anyway. So I decided this would be a good time to write it, ride out COVID, just staying at home. So I did live and breathe it. So I really was just sort of writing and eating and sleeping, and that was pretty much it. There's a few social things, but I was pretty much locked away in my house here, writing it full time to get it finished for June of this year.
Well, have you got any more books coming out that you're thinking of writing, or indeed have actually planned?
Well, yes. The actual book, The Email from God, is. It ends on a bit of a cliffhanger because the actual content of this book, I will explain. There's going to be a sequel, but the first book is it's basically a collection of documents that the 5 characters in the future have put together very quickly over a period of 7 days to send, because what they want to do is to warn present day in the form of a book. They want to warn us about what is about to happen in January, because in their lives they saw an email arrive from God, and there was no explaining it. It was actually the real thing. It happened in their January 2023. But the people who have been funding it, they're actually the remnants of a group of people called the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were set up as an army to look after Christian pilgrims going to Jerusalem about 1,000 years ago. But they very quickly began to develop the Middle East economically, building economic centres and actually just basically using cheap labour and resources for personal profit. And then that process, this is all historical fact, by the way, then that process spread back through Europe until they got to the point where they got about 1,000 economic centres making lots of money. They then had to invent banks to deal with all the money and the profit they were making from it. And then there was some rumours amongst the Catholic Church, these Knights Templar, by which time 90% of them weren't even soldiers in the Knights Templar army. They were economic people making lots of money. That they were actually worshipping like a devil god called Baphomet, and that's all established fact. So the Vatican decided they had to disband the Knights Templar, and in historical fact, we're led to believe that they were disbanded. But in my book, and what I actually truly believe, is that Knights Templar were never disbanded. It just drove them underground, and they're basically hiding in plain sight now, making a lot of money. And there's people who I could mention who could be these people, like the Rothschild family and a lot of the other very wealthy families around the world. These are the people who are actually controlling global economy. If you go to that meeting, there's a meeting every year in Switzerland, in Davos, if you've heard of that, where the World Economic Forum meet. They are basically lobbying governments, and prime ministers and senior people from governments from around the world go there, and that's where economic policy is kind of decided for the world future. So that's the kind of those are the bad guys in my book, and they basically get stripped of all their wealth by God's email. It comes along and empties the bank accounts into a communal bank account to pay for good things. So what they're planning to do in my story is they're putting some artificial intelligence programs onto the chip to send back in time to 2023 to try and destroy God's email before people get it.
Interesting. Well, in the meantime, where can we find this first book, The Email from God?
Right. Well, it's not yet published. It's meant to be published on the 20th November, but it is already it's already available on Amazon. You just type in The Email from God and you'll find it. The cover's very distinctive. It's got an earth with kind of matrix-like numbers falling down on it, and it just says The Email from God on the cover. Yeah. And it's available as a paperback, and also people can buy it as an ebook. Or if they've got Kindle Unlimited, which is like, I understand that's the Spotify of books, people can read it for free on there. So there's, but there are more formats coming out with the publisher that we're just working very hard at the moment to get everything ready, because there's going to be a website and social media accounts and all that. So, in fact, there already are social media accounts up and running. But you just caught me at the process of we're just about to publish it or republish it, even though it's already on Amazon. Yeah. But you did ask me about the sequel. The current book does end on a bit of a cliffhanger, just a bit, and the second book will lead on from there.
Yeah. Well, many thanks for talking to us today. It's been great to have you on the show.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Nice to speak with you, Toby.